Okay, everybody, hello. This is Here Comes the Spider-Cast, number 22. This is your co-host, Mike L, and as always, I'm joined by...
Joshua Mervell, and today we're going to be talking about Spider-Man comics from March of 1981.
1982, isn't it?
1982, you're right, sorry.
Yeah, March 1982, no problem. Yeah, we're going to start off with Amazing Spider-Man 226, then move on to Marvel Team-Up 115, and then Peter Parker, The Spectacular Spider-Man number 64. And today is a very special episode, because for the second time ever, we have a special guest in the person of V. Say hello, V.
Hey, hello everybody.
Yeah, so Josh, I'll introduce you to V. So he is a friend of mine since 1990. I don't know what, two?
I was going to say two.
Yeah, like grade 9 basically.
Yeah.
And I distinctly remember when me and V first started hanging out, he was definitely not a comic book fan.
Nope.
Because I remember when Stan Lee was on the Dennis Miller Show. I remember I was so excited I had no one to tell, so I called up my buddy V. Do you remember this?
It might come, but
okay, so
not right now.
I was like, V, you're not going to believe this, man. Stan Lee is on the Dennis Miller Show. And V's like, well, what the hell do I give a shit? I don't read comics. That would be like if I was really interested in ketchup and somebody was interested in someone from the ketchup industry was on Dennis Miller. I said, hey, man, the guy from the ketchup industry is on Dennis Miller. Would you be excited about that?
That sounds like me.
And I was like, yeah, I guess you're right. Okay, see you later. So I had no one to tell about any of my comic book, stories or passions or anything back then. But then eventually he got into them, and I do remember back in those days. I remember you liked Spidey a little bit. You read some Spidey, right?
Oh yeah, I got really into it with certain artists.
Okay,
like later on, yeah.
Like, what were some of your favorites?
I'm looking at you for a cue.
Todd McFarlane?
Yeah, I like Todd McFarlane.
Okay,
yeah. But there was was it? I think you know what? I'm not so good with the names, but there were people that. Yeah, I got into it when we got new writers. I didn't know this question was coming.
No, you know what?
I would have done some research.
I remember. Okay, first, I do remember we talked about some of the comics from the late 80s and some from the 90s, but I do remember when J. Michael Straczynski...
That was it, yeah.
When he took over Amazing Spider-Man. Josh...
Who was drawing that?
It was John Romita Jr.
Yes, yeah. That's the one.
Are you familiar with J. Michael Straczynski, Josh?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, everyone knows. So J. Michael Straczynski, for those that don't know, kind of was part of the new Marvel era around 2000, and that was when Grant Morrison was doing New X-Men, Peter Milligan was doing X-Force, and then there was the Ultimate line, and then at that same time...
he was doing Amazing, right?
Exactly. He was doing Amazing Spider-Man with John Romita Jr.
Mm-hmm.
And what some people don't know is John Romita Jr. had been doing Spider-Man throughout the 90s, and before that, he was actually doing Spider-Man right here. So this Amazing Spider-Man is drawn by the same guy. It's just... his style evolved so much that it's hard to recognize it,
Yeah, it's very unrecognizable.
Right.
Yeah, and I thought I recognized the name. When I saw that name, I'm like, oh, it sounds like the same guy. But I'm like, no, it's got to be a different guy.
Right, no, it's the same
way.
guy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I think the reason why it's so different, too, is I feel like Marvel now, the artists are kind of free to do their own style. With whatever project that they're working on. But back then it felt like they were trying to kind of keep one cohesive tone for all of the drawing. So I feel like there was a more strict rule book back then with how the characters were supposed to look. So
I think you're right, yeah.
Because it still has almost like that Ditko feel to it. Well,
also John and now, so for people that don't know, John Romita Sr.
Right.
So Steve Ditko co-created Spider-Man, and John Romita Sr. took over in the 60s, and he kind of defined the look for Spider-Man, which everyone followed after that, including John Romita Jr., including Ed Hannigan. All the guys working on Spider-Man at this time drew him kind of the same way. But then once McFarlane came in the late 80s, 88, 89, whatever, he completely changed the style, and at first people were imitating him, but then like you said, Josh, over time they started drawing him however they wanted, right?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway... So let's get back to these comic books here. So we're going to review. So this is only now, the third issue of Amazing by Roger Stern, right?
Right. Yeah, the third one.
Okay, so I'll sum up the story in this one. So we have the return of a character called the Black Cat, who I grew up with from a couple years later is when I was kind of exposed to her, but this is still earlier on in her existence, and so she's not as well known back then. Mm-hmm. So we've got a story here by Roger Stern, John Romita Jr., and inks by Jim Mooney again. And so we start off with our buddy, what's his name? Greg Salinger?
The Fool Killer?
Yeah, the Fool Killer.
Yeah.
So Greg Salinger / the Fool Killer is a character that has been in the comics for about 6 months now. So Josh and I are very familiar with him. He was like a college student with Peter Parker, and it turns out he ended up being a supervillain called Fool Killer. So now this is kind of just picking up the end of that storyline, and then now we're jumping over to Felicia Hardy, who's in this psych ward, along with him. She gives a quick recap of her history with Spider-Man, and then, of course, it's just to set up the fact that she's actually faking, being crazy. So she basically knocks out this nurse and then escapes, narrating the whole time exactly how clever she is, blah, blah, blah. Then we cut over to Spidey here, and we're introduced to Jean DeWolf. Now, Josh, are you familiar with Jean DeWolf?
No, actually, I wasn't.
Okay, because Jean DeWolf, I'm not sure when she was introduced. It was probably in the late 70s, but she has a very, very big storyline coming soon. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but it is called The Death of Jean DeWolf.
Oh, okay.
So that's coming in about 1985-ish. So.
Well, I wonder what that'll be about.
Yeah. So anyway, it's kind of a famous story. To be honest, that's kind of all I knew her for, because by the time I got into her, she was already dead. So
right.
But yeah, so she's a very cool character. So anyway, so Spidey touches base with her, and then basically, we jump back to Black Cat, and Black Cat is kind of narrating her adventures of stealing whatever it is she's stealing, blah blah blah. Mm-hmm. And then, a little bit of Spidey on his own. And then this is the first scene I really want to talk about here, because unlike Bruce Wayne and unlike Clark Kent, Peter Parker is always down on his luck, right? He can't afford to live in an apartment with his own laundry facility, so he's got to go to a laundromat. And I love this little bit here where his Spider-Man costume is actually sticking out of the bag. Yeah, he actually says it here. He says, "I feel awfully self-conscious sitting here in my Spidey suit." Oh, no, he's in his Spidey suit. I thought that was supposed to be the Spidey suit. But he's like, I don't need to attract attention. But anyway, so yeah, there's this really good-looking girl in the laundromat with him, and he tries to hit on her, but doesn't exactly go over well. So we cut back to Black Cat and back and forth. Then she ends up in, I thought it was going to be the same laundromat, but it's a different one. And then this guy is hitting on her, but he strikes out. This is a different guy. And then we get this kind of a silly sequence where she hires somebody to write in the sky. Yeah, and Spider-Man, meet me at our first date. Kind of ridiculous, but whatever.
Right.
It's fun stuff, right? It's fun Silver Age stuff. And so then Spider-Man reconnects with Black Cat, and there's a little bit of flirtation here, a lot of chatting. And again, it's sort of like a Batman Catwoman relationship where she is a criminal and he knows it, but she's in love with him, and so.
Yeah, this dynamic is really fun. I think that their banter back and forth is really cool, and I always love that unconventional villain when they, it's not just Spider-Man punching a dude at the end of the comic. It's kind of this different take on a supervillain. So having them be flirty and have this like new dynamic is pretty fun.
And it's also not just fill in the blank. Like the way Denny O'Neil was writing Spider-Man, right?
Yeah.
Like just like an autopilot plot. Like this is like the characters are individual, they do their own thing. Anyway, so yeah, it's really cool. And then we get a really cool sequence where they go to this
to the costume party.
Yeah, and of course Spider-Man is dressed up as a Jawa. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. And
like specifically a Jawa, not like Obi-Wan Kenobi or something.
Right. And it's also funny that we get another storyline where there's a costume party, because we had just talked about this for the Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends episode, where there was a costume party and everybody was dressed up as superheroes.
That's right.
So
Yeah,
you kind of get this funny bit where this guy's dressed up as the Hulk, but he's like gigantic, so he's got like a little window out of like the Hulk's stomach that he sees
I didn't even notice that. That's great.
Yeah, and his arm is sticking out of like the side of his legs. Like, how does this costume even work? But it's kind of funny.
Very cool.
Yeah. Yep. And this lion is like crawling around on the ground.
And you were gonna say, V?
I was just gonna say, is this the recap? Like, Is this how we're moving through? We're going breakneck speed.
What we're gonna do is we're gonna talk about the plot, then we're gonna do like a review.
Okay.
Yeah. We're just gonna zip through it, just so.
Sitting here with my notes saying,
no. Just so people know what we're talking about here. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So basically, so we're in on this little party, and then, of course, I can't even remember what happens here. These guys burst in. Because these are the people that she's attempting to rip off, right?
Right.
Yep.
Right. Okay. And then basically there's fisticuffs. Then Jean DeWolf comes in, and that's pretty much it, right? They get arrested, and then Spidey and Black Cat kind of kiss on the rooftop, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
But there's obviously more to come. So here's the thing. So because we've got a special guest this week, we're gonna have Vishal give us a couple of notes here. So V has handwritten notes here. Yeah. So V is going to give us the rundown on his feeling. I mean, Josh, both of us love Roger Stern. We love John Romita.
Right.
We love Jim Mooney. So that's not going to change. But as far as this individual issue, we'll talk about it in a minute. But first, Vishal is going to give us his impression of this issue.
Yeah, so you're confusing the listeners because it's V, right?
Yeah, sorry. V, yeah, okay.
All right, you know what? I absolutely love this first panel. It totally grabbed me. Mm-hmm. How do you draw rain? That's how you draw rain. Look at that. It looks so good. It's so atmospheric. I absolutely love this, the first panel.
It's the lost art of the splash page. They don't even have those anymore. Yeah, you're right.
And then, as soon as we move into page 1, or this would be page 2, I believe, I love the art. I absolutely love the art. Fantastic. Yep. Her recapping her story, let's be honest, sometimes when they do these recaps, when the cat's recapping her story, you see it so often, it never fits. It fit here. It fit perfectly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. And when she turns and... let me go back there. Yeah, when she turns, I did not see that coming.
Okay.
You know, when she's like, the red panel there. Mm-hmm. Absolutely fantastic, which of course is just what I wanted him to think. It goes red, and I'm like, oh my gosh, and boom, she just takes her out.
It's fantastic.
It's simple colors, but the fact that this is red, at least they're using the color creatively, right?
Yeah, oh yeah. So I'm not going to just go through the whole thing. I'll jump in when you guys get there. But overall, I absolutely loved it. I thought it was fantastic. The story was great.
So like we could so we'll go along. So I love I'm a big fan of other than the fact that the Black Cat is a little bit too close to Catwoman. I've always thought she was a great character. Yeah. And it's also important to note that she is in love with Spider-Man, not Peter Parker. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a weird, in fact, at this point, I don't think she even knows that he is Peter Parker.
No, I don't think so. But I think that kind of adds to the dynamic a little bit for me because finally something is going right for Peter Parker. And then kind of like the blow of that she's in love with Spider-Man, not Peter Parker. He would have to reveal his secret identity for anything to even work out, right? Sure. So it kind of adds to that, I think, because at the end, this finishes it off with the narration of, like, finally a happy ending for Peter Parker. You guys have been asking for it, but do you think it'll last? Kind of thing, and it's kind of hinting at the fact that, like, this seems like it's great on the surface, but really, it's probably not going to work out because Spider-Man's going to have to reveal who he is.
Well, what's interesting is, and again, I don't want to spoil too much, but because we're eventually going to get to the marriage in our Spider cast here, right? But I will say, if you read along those all the way through these issues, all the way through the 80s, I think it's pretty clear that they intended Peter and Felicia to stay as a couple. And I think that Mary Jane... I
think so.
Yeah, like Mary Jane was kind of just shoehorned back into a relationship with him just because they wanted him to get married.
Right.
But if you read all the way up along, it's almost like overnight everything just changes and all of a sudden he's with Mary Jane. Mm-hmm. But we'll get to that in a few years, I guess, eh?
Yeah.
What's the timeline here, by the way? Like, I know it's written in 82, but I got the sense, like, is this supposed to be is there a year? Is this taking place in the 50s?
No, it takes place, like, in 82.
Yeah. Sorry, man. Yeah, in 82. Just because, I see this when he first meets up with the police captain. She's standing by an older car. She's got that 50s look to her. But,
I think she's kind of like she's kind of like a 30s throwback.
Yeah,
like almost a femme fatale, right? Is that what you're thinking, Josh?
Yeah, that's what I assumed. I think that this whole thing kind of has like her whole deal has like a noir feel to it.
Right.
So To be honest, I never really even noticed that. I think even later on, she jumps into a horse and carriage.
Mm-hmm. She does. Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
and now that you're pointing that out, that's a really good observation.
Oh,
but,
yeah,
but if
Black
you,
Cat does, right.
But if you look, like, everywhere else, there are, like, modern day, for the time, modern day cars and, like, streets and everything. Like, if you look on original 11 digital page 12, the bottom left corner, there's, like, buses and cars and regular ambulances. So I feel like they were deliberately put in so to, like, kind of emulate that and make you feel like it is like just something that's added to emulate that noir a little bit more.
Yeah, like, I think it's not like DC where kind of like Batman kind of is in a nebulous time period and Superman isn't, like, they're all in fictional cities. Like, Marvel characters are always in New York, present day, you know.
Yeah.
And sure, they might throw in these characters to make it feel like film noir, and they even talk like, sometimes the bad guys talk like old time gangsters, right?
Yeah.
But they're always rooted in, it's always modern day, I think.
Right.
It's always current, yeah.
Well, you know what? So, okay, we're talking then 82.
Yep.
Still, yeah, pretty progressive having a female police captain.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yep. That's a very, and you know, it's funny, I never really thought about that, but yeah, you're right. It is very progressive. So yeah, you know what? So V's got a lot of notes here. Do you want to talk about some of the notes you got? Like, we can go through these and go to any page you want.
The next big thing I've got is the laundromat scenes.
Okay.
Yeah. So do we just skip that? I thought that was fantastic. I love the banter he had. And this character here, the female he is hitting on,
sure,
she's so intriguing. She doesn't say a single word.
Right.
She's so intriguing. There she is.
That's true. She doesn't say anything. You're right.
She gives him that dirty look, and then him. Oh, well, okay. I guess, nice talking to you.
Yep.
I really...
Pure Peter Parker. I love it. Mm-hmm. And also, I just got to point out, the inker on this is a guy named Jim Mooney. For those that are just joining us for the first time, Jim Mooney is a Supergirl artist from like the 50s and 60s, and you can look at that Peter Parker face and those eyes. That's pure Jim Mooney Silver Age Supergirl art. But anyway, I just wanted to point that out. And then
you get to the next her scene. Mm-hmm. That was great too. Like, the dialogue is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about she says, "Are you forward with all the women you meet?" And he's like, I work with Farrington Investments. That tends to keep the aggressive juices flowing. And then her, I suppose there's nothing wrong with that. Oh, I'm glad you feel that way.
Uh-huh. You know what's funny? I never thought about it, but the fact that they're two different laundromats. Actually, by the way,
she's in her apartment building. It sounds like, because he says, "You're new in the building."
Oh, right.
And he gives her his apartment number.
But it's cool because it shows the contrast between her, Peter Parker and the girl, and then him and this guy, right? Mm-hmm. Two completely different dynamics. Mm-hmm. So it's just kind of a cool way to structure the story, to have them kind of parallel each other,
Yeah, for sure.
And I love, why don't I treat you to a nightcap? Mm-hmm. A nightcap.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's funny. And by the way, I got to admit, I'm not ashamed to admit, sometimes, like, I am really, like, I up until yesterday, I thought it was laundry mat. I didn't know it was laundromat. Did you guys know that?
Yeah, laundromat.
I didn't know that. I thought it was laundry mat. Isn't that embarrassing?
No.
It does make sense, though.
Yeah, laundromat. I just didn't know. Sometimes, it's just like, I remember when my friend made fun of me years ago because I thought it was Ricker's Red, like a guy named Ricker. Mm-hmm. Ricker's Red. I didn't know it was Rickard's Red.
Yeah, Rickard with a D. Yeah.
What an idiot. Anyway,
you know what? A little offshoot here. I was listening to another podcast today.
Okay.
And one of the hosts, she's like, "Oh yeah," and I chunked it into the garbage. And the other host is
chunked
like,
it.
"What did you just say?"
Yeah.
Chunked it. It's Chuck. She's like, "I've been saying chunk my whole life."
And it's funny because I'm sure we all have friends that say everything wrong.
Right.
And I don't want to pick on anyone, but I used to have a friend that, oh my God, like, she would get every expression wrong, every idiom wrong, like, I just want my piece of the cake, no, it's my piece of the pie, it's like everything was wrong. Yeah. But anyway, okay, let's get back to the comics. So anyway, back to your notes, V.
Oh, well, yeah, and then, okay, I skipped any notes for this. This was kind of silly. Yeah, the writing in the sky. Of course, the art is great. Mm-hmm. It's funny. There's no cell phone, so he just happens to walk by somebody watching the news.
Right.
It's nice to see. And then their little playful fight. I loved it. Yeah, it was flirtatious. It was fun.
Yeah, good stuff. Classic Spidey.
I was jealous.
Yeah.
I was jealous.
You know what? I gotta say, me personally, like I love Batman. I love Superman. But I can't relate to those two. Obviously, most people can relate to Spider-Man, okay?
Right.
And my interpretation of Peter Parker or Spider-Man's relationship with Black Cat is, I feel like most of the people and the women in my life are sort of like me. They're sort of nerdy. They're sort of into the same things as me. But once in a while, I'll have a friend like this Black Cat that's like, why is this woman in my life? Why is she interested in me? We have nothing in common, but I'm sure we've all had that where we've sort of made friends with someone who's, I don't want to say they're from the wrong side of the tracks, but this woman is like a thief, she's a bad girl, right?
She's your Alethea.
Oh boy, yeah. We shouldn't use real names, but yeah, I know exactly who V means there. Yep.
Yeah. It was this girl who, a friend of a friend, she came in from Chicago and wow, she blew us away.
Yeah, she knocked our socks off.
Oh yeah.
Anyway.
So I mentioned that in my notes too. The Hulk costume is phenomenal.
Yep.
Yeah.
When they get to the party, oh boy.
I didn't even notice that. I got to pay more attention to those details.
Yeah.
It's just a goofy little thing, but I think it works.
Mm-hmm. And that's followed by another goofy thing when she sees the guy in the Spider-Man costume and she thinks that's Peter. Well, she thinks it's the real Spider-Man,
right?
Yep.
And the look on that guy's face. Oh, sure, darling, I'll give you a kiss.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And then the wife. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, and then actually on that same page too, there's like a little Superman nod too at the bottom right corner.
Which one? On original page 17? Or
Original 18, digital 19.
Oh yeah. That's
Yeah.
it's definitely Superman, but I wonder if that's supposed to be like Lois and I don't know what they're like.
It does kind of look like Lois, but that definitely doesn't look like.
I wonder if
Clark
it's like they drew it in that way so that the two of them together form the logo, just
right.
for whatever. Yeah, I know what you're saying though. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. So anyway,
so it's funny that you brought that up about Stan Lee. I didn't know who he was. Was that supposed to be Stan Lee, with the mob boss?
Which way? This way?
Yes.
I kind of thought that first as well too, but
I never thought of that. But yeah, it does look like.
I don't know what he looked like in the 80s, but
the shades and everything.
Yeah,
could be. Yeah. So basically, and then whatever. Do you have any?
No,
notes
that's it. I enjoyed the final battle. I thought. She's loving it too. She's like, here I am fighting with the love of my life, Spider-Man, and Spider-Man's like, this isn't as easy as you think, and his experience comes into play when she kind of jumps at the wrong time, bumps into him, and I enjoyed that.
So yeah, I mean, it ends a little bit abruptly, but I think the relationship between the two is what makes it a really cool story, Yeah. And so I don't know. For me, I'll definitely say. This is a classic issue of Spider-Man. I'll gladly read it again. What about you, V?
Oh yeah, and this reminded me. I'm so just tired of the comic book movies. Just tired of them.
Yeah,
I don't enjoy them. I watched Spider-Man and I'm like, oh, this is terrible. I read this and I'm like, oh, this is why I love Spider-Man. Like,
exactly.
This made me happy again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't want to get into a rant, but I do, the Far From Home and Homecoming or whatever, they're okay, but there's still something to be said. They cannot quite match the tone and the fun of these comics. What do you think, Josh?
No, I completely agree. I think that it's the closest they've gotten so far in movie-wise as to who Peter Parker or Spider-Man is, but it doesn't come close to this. Like, this is really, really great. Possibly one of the best issues we've reviewed on the podcast so far. It's up there for me is one of my favorites for sure.
And I think the key is, again, it's Black Cat, that relationship, just that character. She's such a good character. Okay, so we are gonna jump to Marvel team up with Spider-Man and Thor. We all hated it. Okay, Josh, do you want to take it from here and just summarize the plot for us?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, sure.
Oh no, he just go ahead.
Oh, okay. So normally I will say that this one wasn't great, but I feel like for the most part, the Marvel team up so far, they felt like a comic book that Spider-Man just so happens to be in.
Yes.
And I think that this one actually, for me, integrated him pretty well into the story. It could have been a Spider-Man or a Thor comic, and I probably couldn't have like really known either way. Having Spider-Man and Thor already together for this like surgery demonstration, and having the press there, and his alter ego Donaldson, what's his name?
Jesus, I should know this. Donald Blake. Yeah. So I think that they introduced it pretty well, but then I don't know. It's such a weird story. So we have this surgery going on, and then this guy that's in a trench coat pops into the hospital, and it's this like kabuki looking guy. Yes.
That kind of just barges in.
You say kabuki? Are you talking about him in like the trench coat, or him as like the lizard, or
him as like the lizard?
Yeah, I did not like that at all.
No.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't, and I'm no expert on Asian culture, but I wouldn't even say kabuki. It's more like a Japanese type god, right?
Right.
Or like whatever that's called.
Yeah, I guess maybe it was more like the mouth shape, how it doesn't move, kind of reminded me of like that kabuki mask kind of thing. But
right, okay, yeah.
But yeah, this story, I don't even know how to explain what happens in this story. Like.
Well, you know what? Okay, let me just say one quick thing. I've gotten to the point with J.M. DeMatteis that if I see a page where there's like 1,000 bubbles, I skim, because I don't like to skim read comics, but I have to admit, folks, that J.M. DeMatteis is a good writer, but there's just too much frickin' text, and it doesn't. It's not like it's an Alan Moore comic. Like, it doesn't justify. Like, when you read a Roger Stern comic, like Amazing Spider-Man that we just read, you zip through it, and as soon as you're done, there's a part of you that's like, I can read that again. You know what I mean? Like, I can.
Right.
Like, this comic, you're like, oh my god, when is this going to be done? And then when you're finished, it's like homework. Like, you don't want to go back and read it again, right? But anyway, yeah. So Josh, I mean, I don't want to put you through the ringer here, but do your best and explain what the story is about.
Okay, sure. So we have Peter Parker observing Donald Blake as he's performing surgery on this homeless woman. Yeah. And then this like creature, I guess, barges in and starts attacking this woman, and both Spider-Man and Thor kind of pop into their superhero form and start fighting. He gets away, and then it turns out that this old lady is also one of these monsters. So later on, when they meet up again, they start battling it out, and then I honestly don't even know exactly what happened. They turned into smoke and like just went away. Like
it's one of those examples I was talking about where she gives her backstory and it makes no sense.
Yeah.
Why is she telling this giant backstory to these people? And yeah, you're right. And then it turns out to be some sort of like spurned lover, because they escaped from their home planet.
Right.
And he got mad that she left him. And so it basically turns into domestic violence. Then it turns into a murder-suicide. Like, it gets really strange.
Right. And by the end of it, there's no point for either of our two heroes to even be there. Like, there's no consequence to them even being in the story. Like, it's...
That's a good point.
I don't know. It just kind of unfolds and happens to them.
You know, I gotta say, I gotta do a little aside here. Okay, so you guys are familiar with Greta Gerwig, right? Josh, are you?
That name sounds familiar.
No? Okay, so Greta Gerwig is the writer and director of Lady Bird. Have you seen Lady Bird? Okay. Little Women. Have you seen Little Women?
I know of it.
Okay, Josh, have you seen Lady Bird or Little Women?
Yes.
Okay, so Greta Gerwig is one of my favorite current directors, and she's young. And she's sort of just I don't want to say out of nowhere, but she's kind of come up through the industry. And one of the things, I was listening to an interview with her today. One of the things she said was, I wrote Lady Bird starting like X number of years ago. Let's just say 5 years ago. And at one point, there was a 300-page draft, and it was crap. But she just rewrote it and pared it down.
Okay.
And that is the art of screenwriting, right? Is to get it down to the absolute bare minimum to just tell the story, not waste anyone's time, blah,
right.
blah, blah, right? Well, ideally, that's what you would do for a comic book as well, right? But that's obviously not happening here, because even though they've got an editor and even though they've got a publisher, no one is telling J.M. DeMatteis, look, buddy, you got a cool idea here, but you got to pare it down to the bare minimum. Because I know, because I've read like Stan Lee, like there would be artists like John Romita, John Buscema, they would go in and they'd hand in their pages, and Stan Lee would look at them and be like, this story's not clear, you got to redraw it. Okay, this story's not good, you got to rewrite it. And you've got to have someone like that, like a coach, right? To be like, you can do better. And I think that's what's happening, because I know this guy's a good writer, because this guy wrote Craven's Last Hunt, which I think you've read, right?
Mm-hmm. I might have, yeah.
Yeah, Josh, did you read Craven's Last Hunt? Yeah. Like, this guy's a great writer. He wrote Stardust. He wrote, like, this is a great writer, but clearly at this point, I can't even finish the frickin' issue because it's so wordy, right? So, I don't know. I just feel like...
I think that's especially true with comics, though, because it's a inherently visual medium, right? Like, with movies, you kind of get the mix of sound and, like, dialogue, like being able to hear it. But with this, it should be that the action and the layout and what's happening in the panels is telling the story.
Right.
And the dialogue should be there just for context, right? I think that's, you know, with the previous issue we just read, I think that a lot of the stuff that happens in there, you can tell exactly what's happening just without reading any of the word bubbles. You know what's going on. And the dialogue, again, is just there to kind of, you know, give you context about exactly what's happening. Here, the panels don't tell the story, which makes the writer have to rely and lean on the dialogue, which is why it's so wordy and there's bubbles covering up the entire page on every single page.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I didn't like the art so much is the when you have one of it was the last battle scene they have, there is so much going on. There's so many word bubbles, there's so much narration that it's just... It was too cluttered. It was so cluttered. My eyes didn't enjoy it. They didn't.
Especially for a fight scene too, right? Like that should be where there are almost no word bubbles, and you're just able to tell that story of what's going on through the images. But
like this story is way too convoluted for what they were trying to do. Like, it's basically a simple story. It's almost like a Doctor Who thing. An alien comes in.
I was going to say like a really bad Star Trek episode.
But there are no bad Star Trek episodes, so I don't understand that reference. But
okay.
No, I know what you're saying.
All right.
I know what you're saying. No, I got you though. Yeah, you're right. It's like, it's just, I know what they're going for, but they didn't do it. But I do want to touch on the art, because Josh and I have had a lot to say about Herb Trimpe. So V, tell us, what do you think of this art overall?
I just didn't. You know what? Here's my note.
Okay.
Art good. Okay. Dot. But not great.
Okay.
Charm, but like I kept like wanting to like it, but I couldn't.
Yes.
Because it's hard for me to pick out what exactly the problem is. But then there are certain panels where it's just, I just didn't like it. And
well, let me ask you this, V. Did you ever read any of the early G.I. Joe comics from the 80s?
No, but it's funny you should say that because I heard a lot about them.
Okay, because they're great. I was probably telling you. They're awesome. Herb Trimpe is the one that drew all those famous G.I. Joe covers. The G.I. Joe #1, where they're coming out of the tank and blah, blah, blah. He is a classic Marvel artist, but he was never really... I mean, Stan Lee said, Herb, you can't draw well, but you can tell a story. So I do want to say... I love Herb Trimpe, but some of his panels are really ugly. But I think me and Josh have talked about this. But the thing is, I think it's almost like he's getting the job done, but he doesn't care if it's pretty. Yeah. That's my impression of Herb Trimpe. I do love his art, but you can look at individual panels and be like, oh, that's ugly, that looks like crap, the anatomy's wrong. I do think he's a good storyteller. I think the problem might be that at this point, I don't know if J.M. DeMatteis was adding... dialogue to make up for the art, or if he gave Herb Trimpe this huge script, and then Herb Trimpe tried to do what he could with it. I have no idea. But yeah, what do you think, Josh?
Yeah, I think that the best way I can describe my relationship with Herb Trimpe is on original page 19.
That's the page we're on. Okay.
Okay, so the first few panels are pretty good. I like that. Yep. That first panel, I think Thor looks really great. The anatomy looks very good. And then as we keep going, I feel like it just slowly devolves. And it gets worse and worse as it goes, and it just becomes ugly. Like, it is telling the story, but it's not great art.
Well, first of all, on the top row, Spider-Man looks like a freaking Macy Parade balloon.
Right.
But
yeah, he's just like a tube with the Spider-Man head. And then as we see this woman transforming, like, we don't... like, the first panel of her as the woman, like, with her finger up is awful. And then the next one, like, it's blurry and not clear lines. And then the third one, which should be like this, the big action pose, like that big panel, even that isn't done super well. Like,
you know what?
Yeah.
When I was a little kid, I used to copy artists. Like, I would imitate. Like, I would take the art and just try to recreate it. And I always knew that Herb Trimpe, he wasn't, it's hard to explain this, but like, he didn't care about the small details. He cared more about the story. And so I was never as excited about copying his art as like I would copy, say, Michael Golden.
Right.
So, but again, it goes back to the storytelling. Michael Golden is a great artist, but his storytelling is not as good as Herb Trimpe's.
Right.
So I think what Stan Lee was thinking at that time when he was hiring Herb Trimpe was, this guy can tell a story, so I don't care how pretty it is.
Right.
Maybe that's it. I don't know.
Maybe.
So we're on page 9. Oh, am I cutting you off here?
No.
Okay, so we're on page 19 now. And so we've been talking about it. There's so much to read. There's so many bubbles. There's so much narration. I'm exhausted. Now, she's transformed back into the lizard, and now... flip to page 20, and then boom, oh my gosh, now we've got to go into her backstory. And there's so much. And I'm just exhausted at this point. I don't want to go through all this.
Right.
It's too much.
And, in case someone's listening here and is like, well, you should go read whatever, Curious George. No, the problem is not that there's too much words. It's that it's not great. Like,
it's convoluted.
Right, it's convoluted. Like, if this was Watchmen, when you see this, you're like, well, I know that there's payoff. I know if I read this, there's going to be payoff because it's Alan Moore. But when you look at this, you're like, oh my God, when is this going to end?
Right. Complexity and depth is fine as long as there's substance. There's no substance here, right? Like, I'm all for like a dark, gritty, or like complex sci-fi story. That's fine, but that's not what's happening here.
Exactly.
So...
And yeah, you know what? I don't want people to think I'm a moron. I have read Watchmen. It took me a half hour to get through each page, and I loved it. I took my time. Yeah. There was something that was really confusing here for me. He gets thrown. He says, the lizard fellow grabs him by the arm and is like, he'll let go of my arm. He's like, sure, I will. Throws him off of the balcony. And he's like, that's not what I had in mind. And he falls. And then, And I'm like, what's going on here? And then next, Thor starts battling, and later on, Spider-Man. Yeah, no, I don't know.
Oh, here it is.
No, I don't think that's it.
No, it's not it.
It's on digital page 17.
There we go.
Sorry, original 17. So probably digital 18.
So I got really confused because Thor was like, "Oh, how did you survive it?" Spider-Man's like, "Well, I used my my web slinger, and I was able." This is not news. We already know this. Like, why is it? I never thought he was in danger. Yeah. I was confused as to why Thor thought he was in danger. I'm like,
right here. Yeah. By the legions of Valhalla, art thou man or spirit? Yeah. All man, pal. I managed to aim my webbing on a ledge. On the way down, from there on it was easy to swing back up, nerve-wracking, but easy.
When has it been nerve-wracking?
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's like this whole panel could be 2 words long. Like, Thor could be like, by the legions of Valhalla. And Spidey could be like, hey, I'm back, baby, done.
Yeah.
Why
Or
does it even need to be a moment though?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
There's so much like space wasted on this like weird bit that doesn't mean anything to the story.
Yeah, I
Like
know,
it doesn't
I
add
know.
anything. You could have used that somewhere else to better explain what the characters are like the new characters are going through and kind of their backstory, or like give them a little bit more depth. Maybe make them likable, or give them something. We're having this little bit with Spider-Man being thrown off and then swinging back up to say, "Hey, I'm back." Like it could have just been he was thrown off, and then as he's fighting Thor, we see him swing back up, and that's it. It's not. It doesn't need to be a thing.
Right. You're right. Totally right. Again, that goes back to choices. It's like you're writing the story, and you're like, okay, what am I going to spend time on? Am I going to spend 3 panels on this bullshit, or am I going to like get to the next thing, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, again, maybe he's young, maybe he's inexperienced. I don't know, but it's just too much time wasted on this stuff. But
right.
So, okay, let's wrap up this Marvel Team-Up review. I'm going to say I never want to read this story again. V, what do you think?
Yeah, right down to the cover. Even the cover turned me off.
The cover's not. No, you're right. It's
great.
not that good. Bob Layton, I met him. He's a nice guy, but this cover's not great. It's okay, but
it's funny because that doesn't even look like the creature we see in the issue.
You're right.
Yeah,
it
really.
doesn't. Yeah. The Menace of the Mindbender. Yeah, it's not great. I was kind of excited because Thor was in this issue, but yeah, I'm disappointed. And again, I think we talked about this, Josh, that our consensus on J.M. DeMatteis and Herb Trimpe is that they're just not really clicking on Spider-Man, right? So, again, when I was a kid, I had I tried to get every Amazing, every Spectacular, but I never really had the motivation to read Marvel Team-Up, and I think this is why. I probably read 1 or 2, and I kind of just gave up,
Right.
So, okay, you know what? We're going to jump to Spectacular Spider-Man. V, are you prepared to summarize the story, or do you want us to take it?
I'll give it a shot.
Okay, so V is going to summarize Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, number 64, which for the viewers out there or listeners out there, all 6 of you, this is the first appearance of Cloak and Dagger. Okay, so V, you can take it from here.
All right. I enjoyed the cover.
Yeah.
So I'll get into it later, but I do want to say right away, just like the what was it? The first issue we read.
Amazing.
Grabbed me right away. Look at these panels. They're clean. They're not cluttered. I'm interested in what's going on. Yeah. So we start with Spidey just swinging through the city, and all of a sudden somebody calls for help. He goes, and this guy, it's such a quick conversation. This guy he doesn't even get to introduce himself. He's just like, hey, help me. And what's going on? He gives this confused story, and then all of a sudden Cloak and Dagger show up. Spider-Man still doesn't know what's going on. But he looks like he's ready to help this fellow out, right? So he's now fighting with Cloak and Dagger. They end up killing this guy, and Spider-Man's like, what? Well, you just killed him. They start battling with Spider-Man. Spider-Man, he actually gets hurt, and they take off, but they don't kill him. And they even say, hey, I hope you feel better later, Spider-Man. Cloak says, or Dagger says that. So they disappear. He can't find them. That's it. Doesn't know what's going on. He has a tough time now because he's injured. He has a tough time. He gets home and boom, he's out. Next day, he's talking to a colleague at the paper, and he's like, hey, did you do some digging for me? Like, he's trying to find out who that guy was. He ended up getting his name through Cloak and Dagger, right? So he's like, yeah, I found a lot about him. He used to be worked for a pharmaceutical company. I think they talked about how he was stealing drugs,
right,
and doing experiments on children. It was a big case way back in the day. And so Spider-Man's like, okay, well, I don't know what's going on here, but he goes to these experiments that took place on Ellis Island. He gets over to Ellis Island and he does some investigating, and there's a great scene we'll talk about later.
Yes.
And he runs into Cloak and Dagger, and there they are with a whole bunch of mob bosses. And as the story progresses, we find out that what they were doing was trying to create a super drug. Like forget cocaine, forget heroin. They wanted to make a super drug to get people hooked on. And they were using kids as experiments, and these kids were dying. But because Cloak and Dagger, there was something different in their body chemistry. The drugs they injected them with actually gave them special abilities, and they were able to escape, and they've grown up, and now they've come back, and they're getting retribution. They're taking out all these people who carried out these experiments, not just for what they did to them, but especially because of their friends who passed away. Spider-Man crashes the party. They have a battle. Spider-Man, it's an ethics battle. Look, guys, they did you wrong. They did you wrong, but there's a way to go through this. Cloak and Dagger won't hear it. They start fighting them. Good battle scene. There's a really good battle scene, and we'll talk about, like, I really enjoyed Cloak's abilities.
Yes,
his abilities was great, and he swallows up all these mob bosses, and it'll make sense later when we get to it, but they start seeing a light. They run to the light, and it leads them to a window. They crash through the window, fall to their death, and Spider-Man's like, "Wow, you killed him! Like, I can't believe you did that." And Dagger's like, "Hey, they were just looking for the light. I just showed them the way." They disappear, and that's the end. It's wow.
It's awesome.
It's so good.
And you know, I've been rewatching Batman the Animated Series, you know, the 90s series.
Yeah.
And to me, I'm watching this, I'm like, if this was a Spider-Man cartoon, this would be a great freaking episode.
I was going to say, it definitely has that feel, where it's like dark and serious, but also sympathetic for the villain and the characters that are going. It's so good.
Right.
Yeah, very good.
You know, and it's funny because when Josh and I started this Here Comes the Spider-Cast, the main focus was starting with Roger Stern's run on Spectacular. But I gotta say, over the past couple months, Roger Stern's moved over to Amazing, and Bill Mantlow's taken over Peter Parker, and I'm freaking loving Bill Mantlo.
Yeah, it's been
on Peter Parker.
Really great.
He's fucking awesome.
Yeah,
and also we gotta give credit to Ed Hannigan, because again, I don't know what the hell took me so long to realize it, but I'm looking at this issue and I'm going, duh, this is Steve Ditko. Like, Josh, how familiar are you with Steve Ditko?
Pretty familiar, yeah.
Yeah, like, I'm looking, like page 4. Like, this is... Go to page 4 right now.
Yeah.
This is 100% Steve Ditko.
For sure.
Right? Like, the way that the Spider-Man is stumbling, the way his fingers are... Also, the tiny little panels, right? With the cityscape in the background. This is 100% Steve Ditko.
Oh, yeah.
Like, totally, man. And it's like, why is no one, like, I've never heard anyone really talk about this. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong. People love Bill Mantlo. But I've never heard people talk about this run with reverence. But it deserves it. Like, this is freaking great. Like, again, battling on the rooftop with the water tower and the buildings in the background. This is 100% something Steve Ditko would do.
Yeah.
You know, the fire escapes, and look at the texture on the buildings. Like,
right. Even some of the poses that Spider-Man is in when he's like dodging and jumping around feels very Ditko too. Like
totally.
Page 6, I believe it is. Yeah, page 6. He's dodging some attacks from Dagger, and she's kind of throwing these light daggers, and like that pose where he's like jumping out of the way and his like arms and legs are flailing. It's so good.
Right.
I'm really loving a lot of this stuff. I mean, honestly though, I think one of my favorite parts too were like the first 2 splash pages. Mm-hmm. Like it's so great with like the giant cloak and dagger like written in the city. It's so good.
Yeah, because you know what's weird? I don't know how this was published originally, but technically this should be side by side, right?
Right.
Like cloak and dagger. I don't know how they did it originally, because it would have been back to front. I don't know how they did it, but ideally it would... Oh, shit. I just screwed it up. But ideally it would be side by side.
Right.
But yeah, like, oh my God, like just swinging over the city and just, you know, again, no dialogue, but, oh man, it's great. I love it. And like, look at this on page 2, like the little, what are these?
It's a pigeon coop.
Yeah. And like the little guy here, like, this is the thing about, there's a huge difference between Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko. And I want to talk about this because like John Romita Jr. is more like a Jack Kirby artist, like big action and bulky characters. The thing about Steve Ditko and this art here, Ed Hannigan, is like every panel looks like almost like a photograph where it's like there's so much thought and detail put into the background. You know what I mean? It's almost like a smaller landscape. Like when Kirby draws a picture that's 1/3 of a page, it's like an arm punching. But when Ditko would do 1/3 of a page, it's a complete picture. You see one guy, you see another guy, you see the background. So it's almost more like a complete photograph. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's
for
almost
sure.
like Ditko's using like a wide lens and Kirby's using like a 50 millimeter or an 85 millimeter. You know, that's the difference.
Right.
If I don't know, to use
it feels like every panel is a painting here.
Yeah.
Where it's like every panel is like a piece of art, where the other one, where otherwise it would be just to tell the story. So it's very like streamlined and simple, and it's I think really great for telling a clear story. But this is like every panel feels like a piece of art. It's really, really well done.
And it's funny because we just mentioned Watchmen in our previous review. But again, Dave Gibbons' Watchmen art reminds me a lot of Steve Ditko. And again, I'm getting, it's kind of like a similar thing where he's putting so much work into each panel. And again, small little panels with so much going on. Like look at page 5, original page 5, the overhead shot of them all standing on the rooftop. Right. Who in the hell would think to draw a figure that's as big as like it's smaller than my finger? Mm-hmm. Again, to put the camera up there and to look down at what's going on.
It's such a dramatic scene too.
Right.
Spider-Man just realized like, oh my gosh, you just killed him. Like
exactly.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Like this is great. I don't even know. I mean, I could gush about this all day, but I know V, you've got some. Probably got some notes, right?
Because we're on page 9 here.
Okay.
I loved she shoots these arrows of light at him and he dodges them and I'm like, okay, he's dodged them. Then next panel, they're following him and I'm like, oh my gosh. And I'm sitting here thinking, how is he getting out of this? They are following him and they will not stop. And it was tense.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And it's like, we'll talk about Cloak and Dagger later, but let's just talk about the story and the art. But like, this is, again, you talked about, now that these little bolts here are following him, and then he jumps up to this water tower and Cloak's up there, and it's just great. Like, I don't know, man, I love this. And then this panel of on original page 8, Peter in the fetal position, and then these dudes or actually they're cops coming up on the fire escape, like. And then look at this, Spider-Man falls off, but he's hiding here.
Yeah,
like,
how often do you see that too? It's usually he disappeared, but no, now we get to see where he's disappeared to. And he's in pain, waiting for them to leave so he can leave. Oh, yeah.
Oh, I love it. Josh, what do you got to say about this?
No, it's fantastic. I really love that these characters kind of were able to overpower Spider-Man and kind of catch him off guard, and that does happen often when a new supervillain is introduced. Like, he usually bests Spider-Man for the first time, and then the second time Spider-Man learns how to deal with them. But I feel like this is the first time we're really seeing the ramifications of the damage they've done to Spider-Man, because we see him the entire time having these like dizzy, like almost like he's under a spell kind of bubbles around him, and he doesn't like jump off and dive into the window. It looks like he stumbles and just like falls off of this building. Right. And then we just see him in the window, kind of, he's holding his side. He's holding onto the window, and then we see him walk down the fire escape. He doesn't even like swing down.
Wow.
Like he just,
good point. Good point.
He's so sore. He walks down the fire escape. We see him like curled up on the subway, and then we see him like completely dead in bed.
Fuck. It's okay. You know what,
so
Josh?
Great.
Jump back to page 8. Okay.
Yeah.
Look at this page, and just ignore all the text. Okay. And now look at the pictures. Spider-Man is in the fetal position. Cops are walking up. You see Spider-Man. Then you see them. Obviously, he's looking down. He's got his hand down for evidence, right? Yeah. Next panel, Spidey falls. We know because we see these lines and we see those little symbols that show like unconsciousness, right? And then they're looking down. Where is Spider-Man? Next panel, hiding. They don't know he's down there. Awesome. Right. Click to the next page. They're confused. They don't know what's going on. They're alone, and then we see him walking down. And then we see the street, and like you said, on the subway, and then into bed. It's beautiful. Yeah. You don't even need to read it.
Right, and nobody needs to say anything either. There is like some narration, but nobody is like saying, like, nobody is describing what's happening. We don't need to hear what Peter Parker is thinking. We just know, right? It's so so great.
I'm just going to read this quick. At any other time, the wondrous wall color would stay to bask in this unsolicited testimonial from New York's finest and to eavesdrop on the officers, blah, 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 blah. The point is that you could read it and you could get another, dimension to the story, but you don't need to read it because it's all told there in the visuals. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
So there's a couple things we got to talk about, but before we get to that, let's talk about Cloak and Dagger. This is their first appearance. They now have their own TV show. I haven't read many Cloak and Dagger comics, but my impression is I think they're freaking cool. Mm-hmm. I think it's cool that one is a woman, one is a man, one is white, one is black. That's kind of interesting. Yeah. So, Josh, what do you think of these characters? Do you know anything about them?
I honestly don't know much about them because I just haven't read a lot of comics with them in it. I do know kind of their backstory. I mean, obviously we get that here, but I do know a little bit about their moveset, and this issue really made me interested in exploring them more and learning more about them. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, I really like their abilities. You know what I mean? Like, she throws these daggers of light that follow you around. I don't know. I still don't know. Do you have to get hit by all of them to get killed? Do you have to be in good shape to get killed? Yeah. Like, obviously, Spider-Man he's Spider-Man, so he gets hit by one, and look at the damage it's done. Yet she's imperfect. There's one scene later on where she gets hit in the back of the head, and she's out. Same thing with Cloak. Right. He is not perfect. He's got a great ability. He can put you in this void, and now you're lost. You don't know where you are. Again, Spider-Man, he kind of fights through it, and he's like, we'll get to it later, but he says, I knew if I flailed around long enough, I would eventually connect with your chin. And he kicks him, and he escapes, yet his power is still great. He can disappear, he can create shadows. Their abilities are intriguing, and they're also not perfect.
Right, that's a really good point,
I think, too, if I'm correct, she has trouble controlling her power. And like
that could be,
and like she's like pure light, and she can like explode, and sometimes it kind of gets out of control, and that's why she needs to stay with Cloak, because he's a void, like a black hole, and can absorb that light if she gets out of control. Nice. And so I think that the two of them together also are like a really good duo. Mm-hmm. So that's also a really cool aspect of the two of them too. So,
okay, I don't want to get like really crazy here, but let's just, I just thought of something here. So we've got Cloak and Dagger. Okay, now that's obviously, of course, when I was a little kid, I thought that Marvel invented the phrase Cloak and Dagger, but that's like there's like I believe it's an espionage phrase, term, right? Cloak and Dagger. And so they just turn that into these characters, Cloak and Dagger. But the interesting thing about them, like we said, is that at this time there were not that many black characters, but they decided to make one black and one white, okay? Mm-hmm. We've got one is a woman, one is a man. But the other thing too is that Cloak is the woman who's got white.
Dagger. But Dagger?
Sorry. Let me say it again. Dagger is the one that's white, that's the woman. But she is the one who's, I mean, I don't want to get into like the psychoanalytical thing, but she's her powers are phallic. She's shooting these daggers, and Cloak is the one that's
absorbing.
It's like you said, it's a
void.
A void.
Yeah.
That's the feminine side of the power. It's just kind of interesting to think about it that way, right? It's almost like the yin yang thing. And again, I thought I understood the yin yang symbol until like last week, and I realized I misunderstood it my whole life. So it's much more complex than I think we know. But anyway, I don't want to get into that. But this is a freaking cool team of characters. This team of two.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think they're really freaking cool. And anyway, like I said, it makes me more interested in reading about them. I want to read the series that was drawn by Rick Leonardi because he's a great artist. And I'm looking forward to more. V, did you have any more notes there?
Oh, well, you know what? Why don't we kind of been jumping all over the place. Let's get into the story. So it opens up with great panels, as we've discussed. It's fantastic. And I loved it right away where some guy's calling for help. Spider-Man comes down and says, hey, what's the trouble? And this guy's like, oh, Spider-Man, you came. You'll help me? And right away, I'm like intrigued. Like, what's going on? This guy's calling for help. And he doesn't expect Spider-Man. And like, yeah, what's his issue? And then, yeah, now you go to page... let's get to this. It's page 3. I don't know. I like the fear on this guy's face. I like the way he's drawn. Like he's a businessman. Like it doesn't make sense. It's late at night. He's asking for help. He's dressed in a suit. He's all sweaty. Like it's fantastic. And he's just giving this crazy story. Spider-Man doesn't even ask for his name. He's just like, hey, just start from the beginning, buddy. What's going on? Yeah. And he starts getting into it.
The drugs.
Yeah. And then, as soon as he's starting to make sense, boom, Cloak and Dagger. It's them. They found me. They're here.
That's a good point, And I also got to say, compared to Amazing Spider-Man, this is definitely the darker, grittier title, right, at this point?
Yeah, I think so.
And it's funny, because even though Roger Stern was writing it previously, when Roger Stern was teamed up with Maurice Severin, it had a similar vibe, right? Like, it's almost like Spectacular, since Josh and I have started reviewing these, has always been a little bit grittier, a little bit darker, right, Josh?
Yeah.
Yeah, even though it's changed writers, it's still got that same vibe. So maybe that was the mandate at the time, that Amazing was going to be the superhero light one, and this was going to be the gritty one. But, sorry, back to you.
Yeah, so they show up, and we start having this fight, and right away, it's Cloak. He jumps at Cloak. Cloak kind of opens up his cape, and boom, Spider-Man's swallowed up. Yeah. And he's freezing, right? Uh-huh. And he doesn't know what's going on. And his spider sense is dulled, he says? It's muting my spider sense. Right. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, it's almost like he's been sucked into the vacuum of space.
Yeah. Yes.
Like he's like cold and can't move, and he's just floating in nothingness. Yeah.
And this guy, and then our villain here, I can't remember his name. I don't have it written down. But yeah, he tries to escape, and that's when Dagger confronts him and just puts him out of his misery, right?
Yeah.
So good. Yeah, then we get Dagger.
Oh, yeah, and that's when you see her superpower for the first time. She throws those daggers. And we're looking at the panel right now on, what page is this, Mike?
5.
Yeah. 5. He gets hit with quite a few. He gets hit by, looks like at least 5 of them. And we saw what one did to Spider-Man.
And also, I got to point out in the next panel, we actually see these birds here. They're supposed to be pigeons, I guess, right?
Right.
Pigeons, doves.
Or doves, I think. I was going to say, they look like doves. It kind of reminds me a little bit of DC's Hawk and Dove, right? A very similar,
yeah.
Are you familiar with Hawk and Dove, Josh?
Yeah.
Yeah, Hawk and Dove, violence, peace, kind of a similar idea here with a duo. But anyway, so go ahead, V.
And then, and now we see Cloak's imperfection, where Spider-Man's like, I knew if I just flailed around long enough, I connect with something. So now it's like his ability has limits. What are those limits? You know what I mean?
Right.
It's intriguing.
I also kind of like the fact that this villain that we're facing and Cloak and Dagger are coming to confront, he's keeping a bunch of peaceful doves locked up in a cage, and when they swoop in and she kills him, when she does that, he knocks open the door, freeing all of these doves, which kind of mirrors, I guess, later on when we learned that they were keeping these children in a facility. And couldn't, they were these peaceful, innocent children being locked up and tested on. It kind of mirrors that. So I think that placing it, having the scene take place on a rooftop and having those pigeons there is really smart.
Oh yeah.
It's funny because we've pointed out that sometimes in Bill Mantlow's stories, he'll have really expositional dialogue, right? And I didn't really come across it in this issue, but
no.
At the same time, we have to. It's like you said, that he's obviously putting a lot of thought into this. And he might falter a little bit sometimes with his dialogue, but overall, this has got substance. It sticks to your ribs, right? Yes. Some good stuff.
See, I think this is what we were talking about when we were just talking about Marvel Team Up. This is a story that is deep and has some weight to it, and there's substance, right? There's something to hold on to. There's an actual story going on that means something. Where before, it felt like there was a lot of just sci-fi,
gobbledygook.
Yeah, just thrown at you to say, look, here's story, right? Like,
yeah.
So I think that this one just works fantastically. So
yeah.
Yeah, and then and so we covered everything. Then we had that great overhead shot where Spider-Man realizes what's happened, that they've killed this guy, and all of a sudden they start attacking Spider-Man because he's not part of their game plan, right? He wants to turn them in. So we got into all this, the chase with the daggers of light chasing him, and he gets knocked out. The police show up. And then, so I don't know if we didn't talk about this here. So finally, the next day he comes to, and he asks his friend to do some digging, and that's where we get some more background on our buddy who passed away there.
And again, it's like, so we get this huge backstory, and this is gritty, realistic stuff.
Yeah.
Talking about kids that have been kidnapped and experimented on, and then it gets even better because now we get into deep issues of immigration, of United States, of, let's be clear, they're talking about issues that are relevant today. With racial issues, with let's be clear, with white supremacy, because they reference the fact that Spider-Man is on the roof here, and it's like entering the crumbling edifice. Spider-Man feels a chill inch up his spine. It is not his spider sense at work, but his imagination. Below him seems to be a parade of ghosts. Ghosts of the countless millions crowding through the golden door which they prayed would lead to a better life in America. And, it just goes from there. And they actually reference... where is it? The person who's working.
Oh, you missed it.
Oh, did I miss it? Okay.
Yeah. So it's great, and then he talks about the contempt of.
He senses the contempt of the immigration official towards these masses.
And then we get to that great line, which I loved. Overall, else, he senses the pervasive atmosphere of fear. And it's just funny because people don't think like that so much anymore. All they think about is, they're just coming here for whatever, the welfare. They're coming here for the free healthcare. They're coming here for this or that. And he's looking at the other side of it, which it's just not addressed. Like, the fear of coming to a new land, fear of not knowing a new language, fear of foreign customs, fear of officials in uniforms. Oh, it's wonderful.
I think even like his entrance, like right before he gets to Ellis Island, is pretty great too. The fact that he literally swings on the Statue of Liberty, which is like such a symbol for America, and then having him go through this right after that, I think like even further pushes that point that they're trying to make here. And it's just so unbelievably thought out and meaningful.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, it's like we all watched, well, Josh, you didn't, but we watched TV in 1982. But I'm telling you right now, there was no TV show, no cartoon, no song I can think of that addressed this. But
everything was perfect.
Yeah, it's like here we go. We've got Bill Mantlo and Ed Hannigan on a Spider-Man comic. They're addressing an issue that's like, it's always been there, but it's coming up even more in 2020 America, where we've got people who have benefited from their own parents and grandparents coming to America, and they're the ones that are paying for the wall to prevent other people to come to America. You know what I mean? And it's an issue that's been going on for 100 years or 200 years, but I don't know. It's almost like it's always under the surface. But this comic book by Marvel Comics was addressing it head on, and I think it's great.
Yeah, and I think it's a great it's narration, right? They're telling us what Spider-Man is feeling, what he's thinking. It would have lost something if it was like a thought bubble.
Right.
I like the way it was done, because now you got these nice little narration bars that you can read. You know what he's thinking, and what a way to make a point.
Good point. Yeah, I agree. So then we get to this stuff.
I love this. I love where he hears so he's thinking about these ghosts. He gets interrupted because he hears somebody scream, and he's like, "What? Ghosts don't scream." So now he's like, "Oh, you know what? this, maybe Cloak and Dagger are here. He reloads. He gets everything ready.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
Again, it's just a little cool moment where we focus in on his little belt with his little Spidey symbol, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Page 13. Yeah, a little
13.
bit of skin showing.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then his little Spidey web shooter. Oh, it's so freaking cool. Yep.
Yeah.
And then we get the overhead shot of the little room where they've got them captured. Oh, it's so good. I love it. Again, we've got some Steve Ditko-esque little with some faces here and some drama. Oh, it's so good, man. I don't even know what else to say about this. I just love it. Again, and then they cut to this flashback of how they were drugged and experimented on. And again, I just want to cut back and say that later on, Cloak and Dagger are identified as mutants, and so that is the explanation for why they survived these experiments. But at this time,
they allude to it. They said something in their body chemistry is different.
It was different, right?
Yeah.
So that's why they survived these experiments. But it's just such a cool idea. Again,
Right.
I never really realized how cool Cloak and Dagger were until now. But even look at page 18. It's like V talked about earlier how, they got these great powers, but they still have weaknesses. Like, look, this guy's able to walk up right behind her and smash her on the back of the head with, what is this, a chair?
Yeah,
Or
a piece
Yeah,
of wood.
something.
Piece of wood.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just...
And now all of a sudden he's got a glass to her neck and she's vulnerable. She doesn't have an escape.
Yeah.
All he has is a piece of shard glass by her neck, and she's like, I can't do anything here. Like, if I do anything, he's gonna cut my throat.
And also, I want to talk about, we talked about this art a lot, but on page 19, look at this. We've got this, whatever that's called, hanging light, right? We got black. And then look at this second panel of all black. The door's open. The light is coming in. The shadows, right? Oh, it's so good, right?
I also love the right in the middle, I guess the second last panel. It's all black, and the characters are silhouetted in these pink and orange shapes. And that light that we see a close up of in the first panel, you can see the reflection of it from the moonlight shining on the wall.
Yeah.
It's
Good point.
yeah, it's so well done and thought out, and
so smart.
And see, I think that those overhead shots are really great and give a lot of dramatic feeling and intensity to the story, but they also help lay out the scene so you can understand where everything is. That way when action happens later on, you understand what's happening and you can follow it along, because you are kind of given a basic layout of the surroundings, right?
Geography.
I think that's why these panels make so much sense and feel so right too, is because we kind of already get a feeling of where they are and what's going on, and the layout of everything. And I think it's just really fantastic. It really works.
Another thing I like is the dialogue, the baddies, the way they talk, as they're escaping. I'm just going back a couple panels here. As they're escaping, hey, hold her close. She's our passport out of here.
Right.
And they're kind of giving him direction, and then later on, again, now here's my point. I have never met Cloak and Dagger before this. I didn't know if they're regular characters or anything. So at one point, we're looking at the bottom of page 19. One of the mob bosses is saying, he's like, we can slow Cloak down by leaving him a corpse to cry over.
Oh,
that's the end of the page. So here I am. I'm ready to flip to page 20, and I honestly did not know what was going to happen. I'm like, oh my god, are they going to kill her already? Of course they introduced a great character, and she's dead.
Right.
And then it was just a relief. You turn the page, and then boom, there's Spider-Man. Sorry, fellas, she's too pale.
Right.
This is freaking
really great. I also really love that as Dagger gets defeated, she's fighting and the panels are bright and colorful and you can see everything that's happening, and then as she gets defeated, the light slowly starts to fade, and that's when Cloak comes in to kind of save the day.
What page is this? This is original 20?
So it goes from 18, 19, and then 20. So 18 is really bright, and then it's probably the brightest after right as she gets
J. Murr earning his paycheck. I love it.
right as she gets smacked over the head, and then he comes up behind her and puts that shard up against her neck. It's just the lamp that is illuminating everybody, and then as they go into the next room, it's just the light from the other room, and then after that, it's the moonlight, and then it slowly starts to get darker and darker as Dagger is just standing in the doorway, and then all of a sudden they run into the void, and it's just pitch black nothingness, and it's just bubbles. It's so great.
It's crazy, but also it's crazy because if you break it down, it's all from the bad guy's point of view, right?
Right.
Go to page 20. So sort of bright, a little bit darker, shadow, all black, right?
Right.
Cut to the next page, black, nothing, face. Oh, we see the light again. I'm only talking about what I see. Oh, the light. Break through the window. It's all brightness. We see 4 guys falling. Dead.
Yeah.
All of them. It's like
they're not even concerned.
Right. Spidey's like, what the hell just happened?
Yeah.
Hey, he's like, they set the light. I let them find it. The
Great
end.
line. Yeah.
Oh my God. But here's
So
the thing
great.
though, was that Josh and I, we've talked on this show a lot about how abrupt Denny O'Neill's endings are. There is a good way to do an abrupt ending, and this is it.
This
right?
is it for sure.
Like, it's almost like the writer, Bill Mantle, is pulling the rug out from under you and like, oh, you think you're safe? No, incorrect. You're not. And like you fall on your face and you're like, what the fuck just happened? This is amazing. It's really great.
Well, because normally these like awful abrupt endings are, what's Spider-Man gonna do? Last panel is him punching guy in face, and then the end.
Right.
Like it's been there's been some really bad endings, and this one is. I think this one it works so well because it's such like a gut reaction. Like both Spider-Man and the reader are kind of like, whoa, afterwards.
Yeah.
Like it's just done. That's the end of the story.
Yep. Yeah. I loved it. I love that ending.
Mm-hmm.
Cloak activates his ability. Spider-Man's left in the dark, and the last line, tonight he will sleep with the lights on.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. He's not safe. Oh my God.
So great.
Yeah, and that's my final note on it was, not that I want this to end. I'm just saying, we're left with questions. Was that right? Was that wrong? Like, what's going to happen now?
Well, yeah, and that's the thing is, like, again, at the very least, we have two sides of the coin. Like, what is right and what is wrong? What is more moral and what is less moral? And at least we can walk away thinking about it, right?
Yeah.
Whereas with a typical bad superhero story, it's good guy and bad guy. But at least here, we kind of think about it a little bit. And it's like just like V said with the very last panel, Peter Parker. Wait, where is it here? Oh shit. Tonight he will sleep with the lights on. Like, I think it's going to sit with us and we're going to think about it a little bit.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I think this is why this is a great comic. Like, it's like that Marvel team up that we read. I never want to read that again. This one, I'm going to recommend to people, and I'm excited to read it again. I think it's great.
This is how you do a Marvel team up. Like, this could have been a great Marvel team up for sure.
You're totally right.
Right?
Totally
like,
right.
if the audience, if Cloak and Dagger were previous characters, if Spider-Man didn't know them, this would have been a perfect way to introduce Spider-Man to these characters too. Like, there's no reason why they couldn't. Like, they can't make Marvel team up like this. There's no reason. So Marvel team up really feels like they're just mashing 2 action figures together to be like, look it, this is what you want, right? You want to see these characters together, all right? Or it's just a commercial for another comic, right? Like that, the Howard the Duck one in particular felt like it was kind of like, read the Howard the Duck comic. It's really funny. You're gonna love it. So this just worked so extremely well. This is how you tell a story and create characters and introduce them, and this is how you have the story and the art like work together to tell the story, rather than relying on just really good art or just an interesting story with kind of rough art. It's so good.
Well, and you know what? Just when I think that I'm looking too hard and seeing something that's not there with these Marvel superhero comics, I read this issue and I go, no, we know what's going on. Everyone else is missing out. Like, we're looking at the cover now. Let's jump back to the cover, okay?
Right.
Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, number 64. The logo is a little bit altered, where the bottom of the logo is kind of like fading, almost like it's foggy or something. And then V was pointing out something. What were you pointing out with the guy here?
Well, it's funny because right in the first few panels, he meets that the guy who was dabbling in the pharmaceuticals. He was part of the problem, and he gets killed on the rooftop. I wish I would have wrote down his name, but anyways, we know who he is. Yeah. Anyways, he's on the cover. He's on the cover as well as the two cops who showed up. And it doesn't give anything away. It doesn't give anything away. In fact, it drags you in like, hey, what's this about? You know?
Yeah.
What a great cover. Yeah, what a great cover.
I also love like the dramatic cloak and dagger text on the buildings and how it's kind of like incorporated into the surroundings rather than just like slapped on top of the characters.
And you know what? I have to quickly mention Will Eisner. Josh, you familiar with Will Eisner?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Creator of the Spirit. This is what he would do: is he would incorporate the logo into the actual like architecture. Now, Ed Hennigan doesn't quite do that, but the fact that he at least puts it on the building means that I think he's kind of going for a little bit of Will Eisner. And the fact that, like, you know, we got the two cops that we see in the story. We got the guy. And then way down here, we got another cop. It's like, I don't know. It's like everything to me was so well thought out and just so much passion put into this. I don't know. It's like so much different from a lot of the other Spidey comics that we've been reviewing. This is like a great freaking issue, you know? I really like it. I don't know. Like...
Again,
this is.
I'm just going to show my notes to Mike.
He's got some more notes.
I just want to show it to Mike. What I wrote at the very top. If you want to read that.
Better than movies. Oh, whoa!
I wrote that last night. Again, I'm so tired of the comic book movies. I used to like Spider-Man. I forgot about the fact that I used to like Spider-Man because when I watched the movies, I was so turned off by it. And then reading this, it's like I love this medium. I love this medium on the computer too. Right. It's fantastic.
Yes.
I know I'm a Kobo guy. Like I like reading my books on that little Kobo because I can hold it in my hand. I can read them late at night. I like it on the computer. I really do. I know some people want to hold it and smell it, but man, it looks sharp on the computer.
You know what, Josh? I used to be a purist of like, I remember like about 10 years ago or 15 years ago, a guy gave me a DVD-ROM of Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man number 1 to 500. He's like, here you go. You got every Spider-Man comic. I was like, nah, that's okay. I'm just gonna buy the original comics.
Right.
I was a moron. Okay. Because I'm looking at these digital copies and I'm like, no, this is so much, it's convenient.
Yeah.
It's there. It's like I've totally 180 degrees changed my whole point of view. And it's like, I'm not saying I prefer computers, but there's something about it where I could just, as soon as I'm finished one, I'll read the next one. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. I'm not discounting the paper copies. It's a little different with comics. I would love to hold the comic and take a look at the art, but this is fantastic as well.
Yeah.
You know? Whereas Kobo, with Kobo, I have moved away from books. I don't like books anymore. I'd rather have it. But with comics, hey, to me, it's give me either or. They're both great.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I have Marvel Unlimited, and what I do is it's like the digital version, so it's like a subscription. It's like $8 or $9 a month, and it's like a huge library of almost every Marvel comic. Like they're constantly adding old ones and like updating not updating, but like doing like high-res scans of the art and everything, and it's really good. And what I've done is, if I read a comic and I immediately want to go back and reread it, and it's going to be something I go and like revisit a lot, that's when I'll go and buy it.
Sure, right.
Because exactly. then it'll like mean a little bit more that I have like a physical copy of it, and then I can actually like grab it and hold the art. So that's kind of what I've been doing is reading everything digital, and then the odd issue I'll go and try to pick up or find.
Well, and the thing, too, is that, let's be clear, like, I've said this on the show before, Spider-Man is the first comic character I was obsessed with, okay? And as we've been doing Here Comes the Spider-Cast, I've had a little bit of doubt where I go, oh my God, was I imagining it? Was Spider-Man not as good as I thought? And as I read this issue that I've, by the way, never read before, I go, no, I know exactly why I loved Spider-Man when I was a kid. This is why. And I had some of these Bill Mantlo issues, and I read them, but like maybe I was too young to appreciate them, but these are freaking great, you know? And it's underappreciated because, like I said, people don't really talk about these this era of Spider-Man that much. So obviously, you know, people are missing out because this is great stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say other than that. I'm looking forward to reading this. I didn't even see this last. There's like a splash page at the end that I didn't see. Did you guys see
with
this?
Doc Ock?
I saw it. I didn't read it. Yeah, I thought it was just like a preview for the next issue, right?
So there's like a little preview. Let's see here. Life as a friendly neighborhood wall crawler can get pretty hectic. Aside from getting wrapped up with cuties like Dr. Octopus here, I have to contend with college studies, my lovable old maid, Jolly Jonah Jameson of the Daily Bugle, and my ever-swinging social life. In fact, it takes 4 magnificent Marvel comics to tell my full story each and every month. Read all 4 for the total web pattern picture.
Oh, hurry to your newsstand. He won't be around long if I can help it.
Whoa! I'm worried now. Hold on. I gotta save this. No, this is awesome, okay? This is oh God. Listen, Josh, what year were you born?
95.
Okay, you missed out, okay?
Yeah.
Because I was born in 76, and this is what Spider-Man was like when I was reading Spidey, and it was glorious, okay? I mean, I don't want to like come down on what you read,
sure.
but like,
well,
so like
the thing is though, this is what I read because I read my dad's comics growing up.
Oh,
so as a kid, good. As a kid, I didn't go to newsstands or comic book shops to get comics. I just went into like the many long boxes my dad had and he gave to me, and I started reading these comics.
So like. Okay, what was the first new Spider-Man comic you bought, like off the stand or whatever? Or did you?
I didn't really.
Okay.
Yeah, like I didn't.
Good.
I didn't go and buy a lot of the newer stuff.
No, because like sometimes I'll meet like younger kids and they'll be like, "Oh, I started reading Spider-Man in 1996," and I'll be like, "Oh my God, that's so sad." You know? Right. Because Spider-Man was terrible in the 90s, you know. But
yeah,
you know what's funny?
There's not too many great things in the 90s. I think Venom was introduced in like the 90s, right? I guess probably late 80s.
He was introduced in like late 80s, and he became big in the 90s. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I guess there's some fun stuff there, but yeah, there's not much that I go and revisit from the 90s.
No, and the fact is, like, let's be clear. This is my barometer for how good anything is.
Right.
We just spent, 45 freaking minutes talking about this one issue of Spectacular. If you could spend 45 minutes talking about an issue of Spider-Man from the 90s, go ahead.
Yeah.
But I don't think it can be done. That's my challenge, okay?
We might be able to spend 45 minutes talking about an issue, but it's not going to be good.
No, it's all going to be complaints. Exactly.
Yeah, it's all going to be kind of ripping it apart.
Right. Okay, so guess what, guys? Unfortunately, this has been the longest episode ever.
For sure. For sure, yeah.
Here Comes the Spider-Cast. I want to thank V for joining us. You're welcome back anytime.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Oh, yeah. You know what? In 2 weeks' time.
All right.
Okay, sounds good.
He's going to be back in 2 weeks.
I'm out of town next
Seriously.
week.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
Seriously. And by the way, if anyone's out listening there, and this is a serious offer, if anyone's out listening there and you really love Spidey and you like talking on podcasts, give us a message us at mail@comicbooksyndicate.com or comment on our videos because we're always looking for guests, right?
Oh, for sure.
I mean, we want to expand the Spidey family, right? We want to find other people that love Spider-Man as much as us, right?
Oh, for sure.
I assume, right, Josh? Don't you?
Yeah.
He said it like 3 times.
Okay. I believe you, Josh. I believe you.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Okay.
Good. And on that note, you can find us. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Josh. You had it.
Okay, yeah. So on that note, you can find us at Comic Book Syndicate on Twitter and the Comic Book Syndicate on Facebook. If you look us up on iTunes or Spotify, it's going to be under the Comic Book Syndicate, not the Spidercast. Although I'm sure if you typed in Spidercast, you would be able to find us. We'd love it if you guys sent us a message letting us know what you think about the podcast and the issues that we're talking about. We'd love to keep that conversation going. So,
yeah. So this has been. What?
Can I throw out a plug for my stuff?
Do it.
Yeah. Oh wait.
Oh yeah.
In 2 weeks' time, I might be back on this podcast.
There you go.
Oh, perfect.
The only thing I have going on.
All right. No, there you go. So V is not a podcaster, but you know what? I let's just give a quick shout out to everything else we do. So I also do this is part of the Comic Book Syndicate channel, but I also do Flea Market Fantasy with Mike Dell. Josh, what else do you do? You're from.
I'm from? What do you mean?
Well, you do another show. It's called Josh
I do have another podcast. It's called J&J Lose the Plot.
There you go.
Me and my
plug.
about me and my best friend Joel. We usually pick a movie each week that we talk about, and then from there we kind of have a jumping off point where we talk about something else in the industry. But lately we've been kind of expanding and just talking about like things that we like. We're both in the animation industry, so it's kind of a fun perspective to see what we have to say and like whether we agree or disagree on some of these topics. So yeah, go check us out there.
So let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Your friend on this other podcast, his name is what? Jay?
Joel.
Yeah. Does he like Spider-Man?
To be honest, I don't know. I don't think he reads comics a whole lot. But
what if we gave him 3 Spider-Man comics and he read them and he guest starred on our show?
That could be really fun. I could definitely bring that up.
It's like a crossover.
Yeah, why don't you bring it up?
It'll be our own Marvel team up. Yeah.
There you go.
Hopefully a little bit better than that, but
hopefully better than J.M. DeMatteis and Herb Trimpe. Yeah, there you go. Okay. Yeah. So there you go, folks. We don't know what's coming next, but hopefully it's going to be exciting. Join us every Monday for Here Comes the Spidercast. This has been Mike L, Josh, and V.
Vishal. V.
Oh, shit. All right, that's right. We don't know what's going on. Everyone's confused. Okay, so join us in 1 week for me and Josh. Join us in 2 weeks for me, Josh, and V. It's going to be Here Comes the Spidercast. This is the best podcast ever created. Only 16 people listen to it. That's okay. We do our best. Okay, see you next time. Goodbye.
All right, see ya.